integrated grounding goes, why wire in integrated grounding?
In the earliest days of Telecom, um, the framework itself was used as a battery return. And then they took a big conductor or conductors from the various items of framework down to the battery return bus. So the battery has what's called a battery bus, and then it goes over to primary distribution with circuit breakers and then or fuses, and then it may go to secondary fuse bays like what we would call BDFBs or things like that,
Yeah.
and then off to power individual bays of equipment. The building steel, you don't want things with big differences of potential that could hurt somebody. So by bonding all of those things together, building steel, the DC plant itself, the main distributing frame and a wireline office, most transport equipment, everything else, door bucks, window frames, plumbing, HVAC equipment, all that stuff is all at the same potential as building steel. So they tie all of that together in addition to the frameworks of all the frames, and that's what's called the integrated ground plane.
Okay.
It has a couple other names. It's called the Common Bonding Network, IBN, that kind of thing. And that's been around forever. Now, in the early 1970s, when ARBOC started using analog switching systems, they ran into a little problem with them, and it really had to do with circuit board layout and design and whatnot. And so they had a vulnerability to lightning hits, either nearby lightning hits or lightning hits to the building itself, to the roof or something on the roof, that would create a big electromagnetic pulse. Now, anytime you have a big electromagnetic pulse, you have this big magnetic field emanating out from the current that's flowing down through the building because of the lightning hit. So anytime you have a flow of current, you have an electromagnetic field that expands out, and then when the current flow stops, the field collapses back.
Okay.
All right. That field can induce energy in all the conductors that are in that building, including this fairly sensitive electronic equipment. And so they were having problems with that. So they said, tell you what, let's isolate this equipment from building steel, any contact with building steel, and we'll take its power sources all the way back here. We'll bond the negative leads, the ground or battery return leads. We'll bond all them together at one point. We'll bring the framework ground leads back to that. So it has no other contact with building steel, because as this big magnetic field expands out and induces energy into all those wires, that could cause a problem because of circulating currents because of that field. Now, let's go back into nature for a minute. What happens when a bird lands on a high tension line? Absolutely nothing,
right.
because there's no other path to ground unless it kind of wanders over and touches something.
Then maybe it dies, but
it turns to carbon.
Yeah.
It's real quick. So, all right. So they took that same philosophy. They said, let's make this switching system look like a bird on a telephone wire. It's got one connection to something, and we've isolated it from the floor. We isolate it from anything, any steel, building steel cable racks or anything for at least 2 inches above it and on all sides of it and whatnot. And we'll call that the isolated ground plane.
Is that why you see in action movies guys can like swing from the power lines because you can touch it?
Yeah, as long as you're touching only it.
Yeah, it's only it.
Only it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, things get real different
when there's something else
when
involved.
there's a current path. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the higher the voltage, the more likely it is to happen. Now, if you think about the magnetic field of a lightning strike, that's hitting in about 80,000 amps and upwards of 1,000,000 volts at that level, that elevation. That's quite a bit of current and can produce a pretty good sized magnetic field. So that's why they went to isolated grounding for some digital switches. And really, it's kind of an electropolitical issue. I'm probably telling tales out of school here, but
this is your school. You can say whatever you want.
In the early days of the RBox, when they went to this, I said they had this problem in the analog switching systems. By the time they got around to digital switching systems, our standards guys at the time were Belcore. There was only one standard for grounding, and it was grounding for electronic switching systems.
Okay.
So along came digital switching, which was an electronic switching system. The rules were already written, and they required isolated grounding. So some of the vendors built their switch for isolated grounding, one vendor. The other digital switch vendors built their switch for the common bonding network or integrated ground plane. And the RBox said, well, this is our standard. Our standard is this. If you're going to call it an electronic switching system, you have to meet this standard. And we're not of a mind to fund writing a grounding standard for digital switches.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically we shoved it up the vendor's nose and made them build for.
This is what you have to do because we don't want to spend money to
We won't
do
buy
another.
it.
We
Well,
won't buy
no,
it.
this is what you have to do for us to buy your product.
Okay.
So, that's really what happened.
Okay.